Warning, this podcast contains descriptions of murder, torture and abuse. As a result, it may not be suitable for everybody. Los Angeles, USA. Officially the city of Los Angeles and often abbreviated to LA, the City of Angels is the largest city in California. With an estimated population of nearly 4 million people, it's the second most populous city in the United States and the third most populous city in North America. Los Angeles is known for its Mediterranean climate, ethnic diversity, Hollywood entertainment industry, and its sprawling metropolis. Listen to the hometown murders of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, an American serial killer, rapist and burglar. His highly publicized home invasion crime spree terrorized the residents of Greater Los Angeles area and later the residents of San Francisco in 1984 until 1985. Prior to his capture, Ramirez was dubbed the Night Stalker by other media outlets. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, used a wide variety of weapons, including handguns, knives, a machete, a firearm, and a hammer. Ramirez, who claimed to be a Satanist, never expressed any remorse for his crimes. The judge who upheld Ramirez's 19 death sentences remarked that his deeds, quote, exhibited cruelty, callousness, viciousness beyond any human understanding, end quote. Ramirez died of complications from B-cell lymphoma while awaiting execution on California's death row. Ramirez was born in El Paso, Texas on February 29, 1960, the youngest of Julian and Mercedes Ramirez 5 children. His father, Julian, a Mexican national and former Juarez, Mexico police who later became a laborer on the Santa Fe Railroad, was prone to fits of anger that often resulted in physical abuse. As a 12-year-old, Richard, or Richie, as he was known to the family, was strongly influenced by his older cousin Miguel, Mike Ramirez, a decorated US Army Green Beret combat veteran who often boasted of his gruesome exploits during the Vietnam War. He shared Polaroid photos of his victims, including a Vietnamese woman he had raped. In some of the photos, Mike posed with the severed head of a woman he had abused. Ramirez, who had been smoking marijuana at the age of 10, bonded with Mike over joints and gory war stories. Mike taught his young cousin some of his military skills, such as killing with stealth. Around this time, Ramirez began to seek escape from his father's violent temper by sleeping in a local cemetery. Ramirez was present on the May 4th, 1973, when his cousin Mike fatally shot his wife Jessie in the face with a .38 caliber revolver during a domestic argument. After the shooting, Ramirez became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers. Later that year, he moved in with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto, an obsessive peeping Tom who took Richie along on his nocturnal exploits. Ramirez also began using LSD and cultivating an interest in Satanism. Mike was found not guilty of Jess's murder by reason of his insanity and was released in 1977 after 4 years of incarceration at the Texas State Mental Hospital. His influence over Ramirez continued. The adolescent Ramirez began to meld his burgeoning sexual fantasies with violence, including forced bondage and rape. While still in school, he took a job at a local Holiday Inn where he used his passkey to rob sleeping patrons. His employment ended abruptly after a hotel guest returned to his room to find Ramirez attempting to rape his wife. Although the husband beat Ramirez senseless at the scene, criminal charges were dropped when the couple who lived out of state declined to return to testify against him. Ramirez dropped out of Jefferson High School in 9th grade. At the age of 22, he moved to California, where he settled permanently. On April 10, 1984, Ramirez murdered 9-year-old Chinese American Mei Lung in the basement of the hotel where he was living in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. He raped and beat the girl before stabbing to her death, hanging her body from a pipe. This, Ramirez's first known killing, was not initially identified as being connected to the subsequent crime spree. In 2009, Ramirez's DNA was matched to a sample obtained at the crime scene. In 2016, officials disclosed evidence of a second suspect, identified through a DNA sample retrieved from the scene, who is believed to have been present at Lung's murder. Authorities have not publicly identified the suspect, described as being a juvenile at the time, and have not brought charges due to the lack of evidence. On June 28, 1984, 17-year-old Jenny Vinkham was found brutally murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. She had been stabbed repeatedly while in her bed, and her throat slashed so deeply she was nearly found decapitated. Ramirez's fingerprint was found on the mesh screen he moved to gain access through an open window. On March 17, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hendez outside her home in Rosemead, California, shooting her in the face with a .22 caliber handgun after she pulled into her garage. She survived when the bullet ricocheted off keys she had held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself. Inside the house was her roommate Dale Yoshi Yokozuki, 35, who heard the gunshot and ducked behind a counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. When she raised her head, he shot her once in the forehead, killing her. With an hour of Rosemead home invasion, Ramirez pulled 30-year-old Tao Lin Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park, California, shot her twice with a .22 caliber handgun and fled. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. The two murders and attempted third in a single day attracted extensive coverage from news media, who dubbed the curly-haired attacker with bulging eyes, a wide-spaced rotten teeth, the walk-in killer and the valley intruder. On March 27, 1985, Ramirez entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier in Whittier, California at approximately 2 a.m. and killed the sleeping Vincent Charles Zerara, aged 64, with a gunshot to his head from a .22 caliber handgun. Zazara's wife, Maxine Lorenza Zazara, aged 44, was awakened by the gunshot, and Ramirez beat her and bound her hands while demanding to know where her valuables were. While he ransacked the room, Maxine escaped her bounds and retrieved a shotgun from under the bed, which was not loaded. The infuriated Ramirez shot her 3 times with the .22, then fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen. He mutilated her body by stabbing her several times, then gouged out her eyes and placed them in a jewelry box, which he left with them. The autopsy determined that mutilations were post-mortem. Ramirez left footprints from a pair of Avia sneakers in the flower beds, which the police photographed and cast. This was virtually the only evidence the police had at the time. Bullets found at the scene were matched to those found at previous attacks, and the police realised the serial killer was at large. Vincent and Maxine's bodies were discovered by their son Peter. On May 14, 1985, Ramirez returns to Monterey Park and enters the home of Bill Dow, 66, and his disabled wife Lillian, 56. Surprising Dow in his bedroom, Ramirez shot him in the face with a .22 semi-automatic pistol as Dow went for his own handgun. After beating the mortally wounded man into unconsciousness, Ramirez entered Lillian's bedroom, bound her with thumb cuffs, then raped her after he ransacked the home for valuables. Dow died of his injuries while in hospital. On the night of May 29, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Monrovia, California, and stopped at the house of Mabel Ma Bell, 83, and her disabled sister Florence Nettie Lang, 81. Finding a hammer in the kitchen, he bludgeoned and bound Lang in her bedroom, then bound and bludgeoned Bell before using an electrical cord to shock the woman. After raping Lang, he used Bell's lipstick to draw a pentagram on the thigh as well as walls of the bedroom. The women were found 2 days later alive but comatose. Bell later died of her injuries. The next day, Ramirez drove the car to Burbank, California and sneaked into the home of Carol Kyle, 42. At gunpoint, he bound Kyle and her 11-year-old son with handcuffs, then ransacked the house. He released Carl to direct him to where the family's valuables were, then raped her repeatedly. Ramirez also repeatedly ordered her not to look at him, telling her at one point that he would, quote, cut her eyes out, end quote. He fled the scene after retrieving the child from the closet and binding the two together with handcuffs. On the night of July 2nd, 1985, he drove a stolen car to Arcadia, California, and randomly selected the house of Mary Louise Cannon, 75. After quietly entering the widowed grandmother's home, he found her asleep in her bedroom. He bludgeoned her into unconsciousness with a lamp, then repeatedly stabbed her using a 10-inch butcher knife from her kitchen. She was found dead at the scene. On July 5, 1985, Ramirez broke into the home of Sierra Madre, California, and bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron as she slept in her bedroom. After searching in vain for a wife in the kitchen, Ramirez attempted to strangle the girl with a telephone cord. He then started to see electrical sparks emanated from the cord, and when his victim began to breathe, he fled the house, believing that Jesus Christ had intervened and saved her. Bennett had survived the severe beating, although 478 stitches were required to close up the lacerations to her skull. On July 7, 1985, Ramirez burglarized the home of Joyce Lucille Nelson, 61, in Monterey Park. Finding her asleep on her living room couch, he beat her to death using his fist and kicked her in the head. A shoe print from the Avia sneaker was left imprinted on her face. After causing 2 other neighborhoods, he returned to Monterey Park and chose the home of Sophie Dickman, 63. Ramirez assaulted and handcuffed Dickman at gunpoint, attempted to rape and stole her jewelry, and when she swore to him that she had taken everything of value, he told her to swear on Satan. On the July 20th, 1985, Ramirez purchased a machete before driving a stolen Toyota Glendale to California. He chose the home of Layla Needin, 66, and her husband Maxon, 68. He burst into the sleeping couple's bedroom and hacked them with the machete, then killed them with the shots to the head from a .22 caliber handgun. He further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house of valuables. After quickly fencing the stolen items from the Needin residence, Ramirez drove to Sun Valley. At approximately 4:15 a.m., he broke into the home of Kenavath family. He shot the sleeping Chirong in the head with a .25 caliber handgun, killing him instantly. Then repeatedly raped and beat some kid. He bound the couple's terrified 8-year-old son before dragging some kid around the home to reveal the locations of any valuable items which he stole. During his assault, he demanded that she swear to Satan that she was not hiding any money from him. On August 6, 1985, Ramirez drove to Northridge, California, and broke into the home of Chris and Virginia Patterson. He crept into the bedroom, started Virginia 27 and shot her in the face with a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. He then shot Chris in the neck and attempted to flee. Chris fought back while avoiding being hit by 2 more shots during the struggle before Ramirez managed to escape. The couple survived their injuries. On August 8, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Diamond Bar, California and chose the home of Sakina Abouaf, 27, and her husband Elias, 31. Sometime around 2:30 a.m. he entered the home and went into the master bedroom. He instantly killed the sleeping Elias with a shot to the head from a .25 caliber handgun. He handcuffed and beat Sakina while forcing her to reveal the locations of the family jewelry, then brutally raped her. He repeatedly demanded that she swear on Satan that she would not scream during his assaults. When the couple's 3-year-old son entered the bedroom, Ramirez tied the child up, then continued to rape her. After Ramirez left the home, Sakina untied her son and sent him to the neighbors for help. Ramirez, who had been following the media coverage of the crime, left Los Angeles and headed to San Francisco Bay Area. On August 18, 1985, he entered the home of Peter and Barbara Payne. He shot the sleeping Peter, 36, in the temple with a .25 caliber handgun. Then he beat and sexually assaulted Barbara before shooting her in the head and leaving her for dead. At the crime scene, Ramirez used lipstick to scrawl a pentagon and the phrase "Jack the Knife" on the bedroom wall. When it was discovered that ballistics and shoe print evidence from the Los Angeles crime scenes matched the Pan crime scene, San Francisco then Mayor Diana Feinstein divulged the information in a televised press conference. This leak infuriated the detectives in the case, as they knew the killer, by following media coverage, would give him opportunity to destroy crucial forensic evidence. Ramirez had been indeed watching the press, dropped his size 11.5 Avia sneakers over the side of the Golden Gate Bridge that night. He remained in the area for a few more days before heading back to the Los Angeles area. On August 24, 1985, Ramirez travelled 76 miles south of Los Angeles in a stolen orange Toyota to Mission Viejo. That night he arrived at the home of James Romero Jr., who had just returned from a family vacation to Retiro Beach in Mexico. Romero's son, 13-year-old James Romero III, happened to be awake and heard Ramirez's footsteps outside the house. Thinking there was a prowler, James went to wake his parents and Ramirez fled the scene. James raced outside and noted the colour, make and style of the car, as well as a partial license plate number. Romero contacted the police with this information, believing James had chased away a thief. After this encounter, Ramirez broke into the house of Bill Carnes, 30, and his fiancée Inez Erickson, 29, through a back door. Ramirez entered the sleeping couple's bedroom and awakened Carnes when he cocked his .25 caliber handgun. He shot Carnes 3 times in the head before turning his attention to Erickson. Ramirez told the terrified woman that he was the Night Stalker and forced her to swear her love to Satan as he beat her with his fists and bounded her with neckties from the closet. After stealing what he could find, Ramirez dragged Erickson to another room to rape her. He then demanded cash and jewellery and made her swear on Satan. There was no more. Before leaving the home, Ramirez told Erickson, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." Erickson untied herself and went to the neighbour's home to help for her severely injured fiancé. Surgeons removed 2 of the bullets from his head and he survived his injuries. Erickson gave a detailed description of the assailants and to the investigators, and police obtained a cast of Ramirez's footprint from Romero's home. The stolen car was found on August 28th in Wilshire Center, Los Angeles. Police obtained a single fingerprint from the rearview mirror despite Ramirez's careful efforts to wipe down and clean the car of prints. The print was positively identified as belonging to Ramirez and was later described as a 25-year-old drifter from Texas with a long rap sheet that included many arrests for traffic and illegal drug violations. Law enforcement officials decided to release to the media a mugshot of Ramirez from a December 12, 1984 arrest for auto theft, and the night stalker finally had a face. At a police press conference it was announced, "We know who you are now, and soon everybody else will. There'll be no place for you to hide." On August 30th, 1985, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, unaware that he'd become the lead story in virtually every major newspaper and television news programs across California. After failing to meet his brother, he returned to Los Angeles early on the morning of August 31. He walked past police officers who were staking out the bus terminal in the hope of catching the killer should he attempt to flee on an outbound bus and into a convenience store in East Los Angeles. After noticing a group of elderly Mexican women fearfully identified as El Matador, or the killer, Ramirez saw his face on the front pages of the newspaper rack and fled the store in panic. After running across the Santa Fe freeway, he attempted to carjack a woman but was chased away by bystanders who pursued him. After hopping over several fences and attempting 2 more carjacks, he was eventually subdued by a group of residents, one of whom had struck him over the head with a metal bar in the pursuit. The group held Ramirez down and relentlessly beat him until the police arrived and took him into custody. Jury selection for the trial began on July 22, 1988. At his first court appearance, Ramirez raised a hand with a pentagon drawn on it and yelled, "Hail Satan." On August 3, 1988, the Los Angeles Times reported that some jail employees overheard Ramirez planning to shoot the prosecutor with a gun, which Ramirez intended to have smuggled into the courtroom. Consequently, a metal detector was installed outside and intensive searches were conducted on people entering. On August 14th, the trial was interrupted because one of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary, did not arrive at the courtroom. Later that day, she was found shot dead in her apartment. The jury was terrified as they could not help wondering whether Ramirez had somehow directed this event from outside and from his prison cell, whether he could reach other jurors. However, it was ultimately determined that Ramirez was not responsible for Singletary's death, as she was shot and killed by her boyfriend, who later committed suicide with the same weapon in a hotel. The alternative juror who replaced Singletary was too frightened to return to her home. On September 20th, 1989, Ramirez was convicted of all charges: 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. During the penalty phase of the trial on November 7th, 1989, he was sentenced to die in California's gas chamber. He stated to reporters after the sentences, quote, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland," end quote. The trial cost $1.8 million, which was at the time made it the most expensive in the history of California until it was suppressed by O.J. Simpson murder case in 1994. Ramirez died of complications secondary to B-cell lymphoma at Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California on June 7, 2013. He had also been affected by chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C viral infection. At 53 years old, he had been on death's row for more than 23 years. Thank you for listening to this episode. This is a Need Media production. We produce Hometown Murders, Mind-Blown History, and a Brief History podcast. The episode is written and hosted by myself, Andrew Knight, and music, sound, and editing is by Harry Edmondson.